Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns, I teach knitting workshops and I sell yarn online at my website YarnAddict.co.uk. You can find all the links to everything I'm going to talk about below this video, including how to sign up to my newsletter, how to find my yarn patterns and online courses, and all my social media and my Facebook group. So I'm going to talk about this cowl today, which is the Starburst Cowl, which is now been released. It hasn't been released when I'm filming this, but when this is on YouTube, it will have been released. So if you like today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps me a lot. And leave me a comment to let me know what you think. Have you tried tuck stitch before? Do you fancy trying it? Let me know. So this is a tuck stitch cowl. If you've been watching my Vlogtober videos this year, if you're watching this in the future, Vlogtober 2022, I was in Spain for a week earlier in the month and I knitted this in 3 days. So I knitted 50 rounds. I knitted 20 rounds before I left for Spain, then I knitted 30 rounds at the airport and on the flight to Spain. Then I got there and I tried it on and I realized it was a bit too big, still probably on the big side, and then I ripped that out and started again, and it turned out the 50 rounds was actually half the cowl because the cowl is 100 rounds. You can do more rounds or fewer rounds if you want to. I've used a DK yarn, Monosol Uruguay silk blend. I think it was probably about 70 grams of the main colour. It's in the pattern, and I think I used about 20 grams of the second colour. But all those details are in the pattern and on the pattern page. Pattern will be available from Ravelry and Payhip, and all the links are below. So let me take it off so that I can show it to you up close. So hang on, that's the wrong way up. Let's do it that way. That's the right way up. So this uses a tuck stitch pattern. I have another tuck stitch video as well on another stitch pattern which I used for a design for Knitting Magazine last winter. So I will link that below this video if you fancy having a look at more. But this is a tuck stitch pattern, and I have filmed a little tutorial to show you how to work this stitch pattern. If you have done brioche knitting, you will see that there are some similarities. Having said that, yesterday I taught a workshop where I taught brioche in the morning. Everyone except for one, I think, were brand new to brioche, or they had tried brioche but not got on with it, I think. So I think there's one who was a very good brioche knitter. I think the rest were new to brioche. And we did brioche in the morning, and then we did tuck stitches in the afternoon, and they all said that tuck stitches were easier. So if you've been put off by brioche because you think it's too difficult, I mean, it's not. Give it a go. It's not as bad as you think it is. You just need to start at the beginning and take it step by step. But tuck stitches is easier, but it is similar to brioche. But it gives you a completely different fabric from brioche. I used to use tuck stitches a lot when I used to do machine knitting. Very popular with machine knitters. And then when I tried to see if I could translate it into hand knitting, and I managed to come up with a couple of stitch patterns, but I didn't have that much luck. And then I discovered Nancy Marchant's book called, I think it's just called Tuck Stitches by Nancy Marchant. It's in my workshop bag downstairs from yesterday. But it's a brilliant book if you're interested in exploring tuck stitches more. It's Tuck Stitches by Nancy Marchant. I'll put the details below as well. And Nancy says in the book that she thought, I think she said that she only knew tuck stitches from machine knitting, and then she was trying to see if she could translate it to hand knitting, and she found that adding a second colour made a big difference to the stitch pattern. So this is a two-colour tuck stitch pattern. Machine knitting, I only did it in one colour, I think. But tuck stitches are very popular in commercial knitwear. Quite often, because I look at stitch patterns and things in shops, I can quite often see that things have tuck stitches in them. Anyway, no more talking from me. Here's the tutorial. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. So let's look at how to knit this tuck stitch pattern. I am going to pretend I'm knitting in the round. I'm not actually knitting in the round, but the cowl is knitted in the round. And I didn't want to cast on for an in the round swatch because it obviously takes up a lot more time because I have to knit both sides. So a way you can knit in the round without knitting in the round, which is great for swatching, is I finish with the yarn, because I'm knitting with a purple yarn, finish with that over there, and then I just loop it around the back, leave a longish loop. Doesn't have to be too long. I'm actually going to unravel this one later, but you want to leave it long enough so that at the end you can cut all these strands at the back and lay your swatch flat if you actually want to measure it. I'm not going to worry about that because this is obviously just done for this tutorial. So I've done a few rows of 1 by 1 rib because this pattern is essentially a 1 by 1 rib. So I've done a few rows of that, and I've done 1 row in the contrast color. So the first time you do this pattern repeat, you will not have the contrast color. But after that, once you start a new section of the pattern repeat, you will have a row of the contrast color. So tuck stitch is similar to brioche, as I said earlier, but it's a bit different. But you will recognize some of the things from brioche if you have tried brioche, but I think it's a lot easier. So the pattern repeat, I'm going to do 3 discarded stitches first, and then I'm going to purl one, and then the next one is a slip one with the yarn in front. And I've just realized that I've actually not done the setup row correctly. So let's start here. So I'm going to purl one to start with. So I'm going to do this English, when I'm just knitting and purling, I'm going to do English style. When I'm showing you the actual stitch pattern, I will do English style and continental style because it is slightly different. So let's do continental style first. Let me just work out where I can put the pattern where I can see it. Okay, so we have a knit one, purl one, and then the next stitch is a slip stitch. So I'm going to show the continental style first. So you're going to slip that stitch with the yarn over, just like you do in brioche knitting. So if you have done brioche knitting, this will be familiar to you. If you haven't done brioche knitting, this is easier. So if you're doing a continental style, take the needle behind the working yarn into the stitch purlwise and take it off. And that gives you the yarn over that needle, and then you can just carry on. And if you knit English style, you have to take to get the yarn over, you have to take the yarn to the front, then slip the stitch purlwise, and then you're going to purl the next stitch. So in order to purl the next stitch, you have to take the yarn around the needle back to the front. So when you pull the next stitch, English style, oh, that didn't actually go through, hang on. Let's try that bit again, because I didn't actually manage to purl it, there we go. So when you have purled that next stitch, you can see you have that purple loop over the pink stitch and the needle. And then I'm going to knit one, purl one. Is that right? No, hang on. Yes, so knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. Okay, and then we have another slip stitch with the yarn over. So continental style, just take the needle behind the yarn into the stitch purlwise, so you get that loop over the needle above the slip stitch. Then I'm going to purl one, knit one, purl one, and then I'm going to do another slip stitch. So I'll do it English style this time. So yarn to the front, into the stitch purlwise. You now have the yarn at the front, and your next stitch is a purl stitch. So if you just purl that stitch now, you lose that yarn over. So in order to create a yarn over when the next stitch is a purl stitch, this is just like it is in lace knitting. So if you're familiar with lace knitting, this should be familiar to you. You take the yarn over the needle to the back and around to the front again, so all the way around the needle. So you can see the yarn goes from the front around to the back and then back to the front. And then you're going to purl the next stitch. And let me go back to continental style, so you can see now I've created a yarn over that needle. So that's probably familiar to you. So I'm not going to do I'm not going to do another one in that last stitch. Actually, yes, I will do. Hang on, let's do another one here. So if you purl regular continental style, so I purl Norwegian style. So if you do regular continental purl, let's look at that. So take the needle behind the working yarn into the stitch purlwise and slip it off, and then you just take the yarn to the front for your normal purl stitch. Okay, so then we get to the end of the needle, and we're going to, hang on, let me just pull that tail a bit, and then you don't have to slide the stitches back to the beginning of the needle like you do with brioche knitting, because the cowl is actually worked in the round, and you know, this is not like brioche where you have to work each row twice. So I'm only sliding it back to the beginning of the needle because I'm pretending to knit in the round. So I loop that purple yarn around the back so I can knit another right side row. So I'm going to start again by knitting 3 stitches. 3, okay. Actually, I should probably pull them to create a garter stitch on the edge. Doesn't really matter. The cowl is knitted in the round, so you can kind of just ignore this bit because that's not applicable to the cowl, so don't let that put you off. It's just so I can knit this in the round. Hang on, let me just untwist my cable. There we go. So these are the Knit Pro Mindful interchangeable needles with a swivel cable, which I highly recommend. Okay, so I'm going to do a knit one, purl one, and then the next one is my slip stitch, and I can see that because it's a stitch with a yarn over. And now, and this is where it varies from brioche stitch, now I'm going to add another yarn over to that stitch. So I put the needle behind the working yarn into the stitch purlwise and slip it off, and I add another yarn over. So if you do it English style, yarn to the front, slip the stitch and the yarn over. One problem we're having in yesterday's workshop was that some people were working the yarn over all the stitch but working them independently. They're a pair, so you have to slip the stitch and the yarn over together, and some people struggled a bit with that to start with yesterday. Then I'm going to take the yarn between the needles to the front so I can purl the next stitch. If the next stitch was a knit stitch, then I wouldn't be taking the yarn to the front. And then I'm going to knit, purl. Okay, next one is a another slip stitch. So let's do it continental style with a continental purl afterwards. So behind the working yarn into the stitch purlwise, and then if I'm purling continental style, I just take the yarn to the front and purl. And English style again, because I do think this is more difficult if you knit English style. Yarn to the front, slip the stitch purlwise. What a lot of people struggle with, both in brioche knitting and tuck stitches when they knit English style, is the purl stitch after the slip stitch. The fact that you have to take the yarn to the front again for the purl stitch. What I kept hearing people saying when I've taught the brioche knitting is, oh, so I have to do the yarn over after the purl stitch. And no, not really. The yarn over, it's the yarn at the front here, and then yarn has to be in the front for the purl stitch, which is a separate stitch, so you have to take the yarn to the front again for the purl stitch. But you know, whatever you need to say in your head to make it work for you is fine. So I'm going to go back to continental style knitting and Norwegian purl. So slip it, yarn in front for the yarn over, slip it purlwise, and yarn around to the front again if you knit English style, and then purl the next stitch, which is a purl stitch, and then knit and purl. And last one, I'll do that on continental style. So yarn behind the needle, slip the stitch purlwise and slip it with the yarn over, and then I'm going to purl the last stitch and knit, purl to the end of the row. Okay, just pull these strands a bit tight so it tightens up that final stitch a bit. And then remember what I said, you don't have to do this for the pattern. I'm just doing this so I can knit in the round. I'll slide my stitches to the beginning of the needle, which is not something you have to do in the pattern. It's just for this. Oops, don't want my ball of yarn to fall on the floor. And then I'm going to loop the yarn behind, and now we're on row 3, I think. So I'm going to just knit my edge stitches. Obviously, because this cowl is working around, you go straight into the pattern. I'm going to knit, purl, and now you can see that slip stitch has 2 yarn overs. And this is where it differs from brioche, because in brioche you only ever have 1 yarn over. Yarn to the front, slip the stitch and the 2 yarn over purlwise, and then yarn to the front again to be able to purl. So we're piling more yarn overs on top of yarn overs. Let me just do this, and it does, the more yarn overs you get, the more awkward it looks. I think that was the term I decided is most suitable to describe this. It just looks awkward. By the way, I do apologize for the state of my nails. I should have done them last night, but I was too tired after teaching all day and getting home late. So continental style, yarn behind the needle to create the yarn overs. That's your yarn over into the stitch purlwise, take them off, So you now get 3 yarn overs and then purl, knit, purl, yarn to the front, slip the stitch purlwise, yarn around the needle, and then purl, knit, purl, yarn to the yarn over into the stitch purlwise, take the stitch and the slip the yarn overs, take the stitch and the yarn overs off, and then purl. Okay, and then we are going to do row 4. So you're going to end up with 4 rows where you are adding yarn overs, and then on row 5 you do your kind of consolidation row, I guess we can call it, where you get rid of those yarn overs. So I'm going to just knit, purl, and then I now have, can you see that? 1, 2, 3 yarn overs plus the stitch. For the first time you do the repeat, that stitch will be in the main color. So for the first repeat, you have to be careful because that stitch will be, it won't be the contrast color, it'll be in your main color. So just be careful. So now I'm going to do another yarn over and slip the stitch and all the 3 yarn overs. So you just have to be very careful that you actually put your needle into the stitch. It's easier once you've started adding the contrast color because you can see it better. Okay, English style, yarn to the front, put my needle into, and it becomes a little bit more difficult the more yarn overs you add. Make sure I go into the stitch and then yarn around the needle, ready to purl. Hang on, yarn to the back. I don't normally knit English style, so this is not a very good example. Oh, I'm especially bad at English purl. Okay, so because I've finished with the purl stitch, my yarn's here at the front, so I can leave the yarn there, slip the stitch purlwise, and then when I take the yarn around the needle again, it adds another yarn over on top. So knit, purl, knit, and then yarn to the front to purl, and then when I finish the purl stitch, English style, the yarn's already at the front, so if I leave the yarn there, because otherwise I'm taking it to the back and back to the front again, so I can just leave it there, slip the stitch and the yarn overs purlwise, yarn around the needle, and then purl the next stitch. Okay, let me go back to continental knitting now. I'm getting better at English style knitting, but I feel awkward when I do it. I think that's the thing. Okay, so remember I'm only sliding the stitches because I'm pretending to work in the round. So normally when you're knitting the actual cowl, the second color, you will carry that up around the back. I've just carried, I haven't, normally when I carry it up the side, I kind of weave it in, but I haven't done that. So it looks a little bit, doesn't look great, but that's fine, because this is just a little swatch for this video, so it's not a real thing. So I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, and then I'm going to knit this stitch with all the yarn overs. So you can see I now have 4 yarn overs. So 1, 2, 3, 4 yarn overs. And once that stitch is in the contrast color, it's fairly easy because you can see it. The first time when it's in the main color, you have to be careful, because if you knit just the yarn overs and you drop that stitch off, that will unravel. So just the first time you do it, before you add the contrast color, just be careful, because that stitch will be in your main color. So go into the stitch and knit the stitch, and all the yarn overs just sit on top of that stitch. Can you see that? This is sit on top, and then I'm going to purl, knit, purl. So if you knit English style, you finish with a purl, yarn to the back, because the next stitch is a knit stitch and you're not adding a yarn over now. So just use your fingers to separate the stitch if you need to. Go into the actual stitch, knit it, and then take the stitch and all the yarn over off your needle. Let me go back to doing a continental style. Knit, purl, knit, purl. By the way, if you are interested in learning to knit how I knit, I do have an online course. Okay, I caught that needle. So now I'm going to knit that stitch with all the yarn overs. So whether you knit English or continental style, just go into the actual stitch and knit it, and let all the yarn overs drop off, so they kind of sit above your working yarn at the back. The back is not very attractive on this stitch pattern. Some tuck stitches look good on both sides, some look good on one side. This, in the original stitch pattern that I found from a stitch dictionary, this actually would have been the wrong side, so I had to change the stitches. All the slip stitches were worked on a purl stitch, and I had to flip it so that I could work it in the round. So there we go. I'm going to knit the stitch with all the yarn overs. By the time you get to the point where you have 4 yarn overs purled on top, it just feels awkward. That's the only way of describing it, is that it feels awkward. So if you look closely at your knitting, you can see that these yarn overs, that stitch is a little bit longer, and you can see the yarn overs are kind of piled on top. You see that there? That's what they are. So let's look at, this is the actual Starburst Cowl. That's what it looks like. And then this is another swatch I did in a different yarn, which I did for a design submission for a magazine a couple of years ago, which didn't get commissioned. It doesn't look very attractive on the wrong side, as you can see, but it looks very attractive on this side. So if you have any questions, just ask below this video. I'll put all the links to where you can find the pattern, which is available from both PayHip and Ravelry. Make sure you sign up to my newsletter. The link to that is below as well, so that you don't miss out on future pattern releases and discounts. I always do a launch discount for at least a week when I launch a new pattern. And the details of that is always in my newsletter and on the pattern page. So if the discount is not on the pattern page, it's not valid anymore. But sign up to my newsletter. All the links are below this video, where you can find the pattern on PayHip and Ravelry. And I may also have some of this yarn, which is Monosol Uruguay Silk Blend, in my online shop, so do check that out as well. And you can find the links to my online courses as well below this video. And thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.